Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into a world of stone walls, echoing footsteps, and the soft clatter of wooden clogs on flagstones. You're not in your bed anymore. You're standing just outside the high gates of a medieval convent. It's early morning, the fog is thick, and dew slicks the grass underfoot. A low bell chimes somewhere behind the ivy-covered walls, and the scent of something warm and slightly sour floats toward you, milk cheese, something in between. You pull your cloak tighter. The guards, or rather sisters, don't look particularly intimidating, but they also don't smile. You're not here to cause trouble. You're here to discover why these modest, prayerful women invented cheese. It sounds silly, doesn't it? But in a time when food spoiled quickly, money was scarce, and meat was often forbidden, turning milk into something durable and delicious was more than practical. It was a tiny miracle. Still, you probably wouldn't survive here. Between the 3 a.m. wake-up bells, the absolute silence during meals, and the scent of sheep wool and pickled cabbage, you'd be begging to leave by midday. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're listening right now from a cozy corner of the world, drop your location and local time in the comments below. I love seeing where you're all tuning in from. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You push open the creaking wooden gate. It groans with the weight of centuries. Inside the convent isn't silent. It hums with quiet routine. A nun passes her head, bowed, her feet soft on the stones. You follow her past a stone fountain, whose water smells faintly of copper and moss. Morning prayers are done, and the community is beginning to stir. The abbey's layout isn't what you expect. Yes, there's a chapel, simple and narrow, with light slanting through dusty stained glass. But there's also a walled garden, where vegetables peek from the frost, a stable with bleating sheep, and a low shed whose door is already open. That's where you're headed. The cheese-making shed doesn't look sacred. It's small and dark with tools that haven't changed in 500 years. Wooden paddles, curved knives, muslin cloths, and vats dark with use. You can smell it now. It's a pungent mix of curdling milk, damp straw, and something earthy mushrooms. Old boots. Inside, Sister Elfrida is elbow-deep in curds. She's muttering prayers under her breath, but it doesn't seem entirely devotional, more like muscle memory. You watch her ladle steaming milk into a broad vat, stirring in something thick and golden. Rennet, maybe. An enzyme from a calf's stomach. Delicious, right? But this isn't just a kitchen. It's a laboratory, a storage room, and a chapel all rolled into one. Making cheese in a convent wasn't just about feeding the sisters, it was about stewardship. Every drop of milk from their tiny herd had to be stretched, preserved, honored. Cheese was shelf-stable, easy to trade, and when made right, borderline divine. You glance up at the rafters. Herbs hang drying, but so do wheels of aging cheese suspended in linen, swaying slightly in the draft. Sister Elfrida catches your gaze and smiles faintly. "The good ones sing," she says, tapping one of the wheels. You hear nothing, but then maybe you're not listening right. Outside you hear the clang of a distant bell. Terse, the third prayer of the day. You've only been here a few hours, but the rhythm is sinking in. Wake, pray stir the milk, recite, psalms, scrub the tools. It's a life ruled by cycles of prayer, of seasons of spoilage and surprise. Back in the garden, another nun carries a bucket of herbs, fenugreek perhaps, or lovage. These will find their way into the cheeses, lending flavors sharper than the sisters' whispers. And now you begin to see it. Cheese wasn't just nourishment, it was theology. It was transformation. Turning perishable milk into something solid, savory, and almost immortal. That was the miracle. That was the parable. And for women cloistered away from the world, crafting something enduring from the simplest ingredients became an act of devotion. You rest on a mossy bench by the cloister wall. A black cat walks past you, tail high, unconcerned. Somewhere above, a bird sings just one note, clear and sweet. And you realize you've crossed a threshold. You're not just visiting now. You're part of the rhythm. You're inside the abbey, inside its walls, and very soon, inside its cheese. So, You don't get long to sit on that mossy bench. The rhythm of the abbey won't let you rest for long, not yet. Before you know it, you're being summoned silently by a novice with ruddy cheeks and hay in her veil. She doesn't speak, just gestures toward the cloister hallway with a half smile. You follow your feet echoing gently on the flagstones. Today, you're going deeper into the convent's pulse, the rules, the routines, and most surprisingly, the smells. You wake before sunrise. Of course you do. Everyone here does. The bell sounds like it's ringing inside your head, and the cold stone under your bare feet is an alarm clock of its own. There's no snooze button, just a quick prayer whispered through chattering teeth, and a long line of half-sleeping nuns filing into the chapel. This is prime the first full prayer service of the day, and it's not optional. You stand there in the flickering candlelight, shoulder to shoulder with women whose hands are already rough with winter. You catch the scent of wool, slightly damp, slightly animal, and something sharper. Garlic vinegar. Ah yes, Sister Thomasina, who always cleans the chapel floor with pickled beet brine for reasons nobody questions anymore. After prayers, it's time for work. There's no chit-chat. The rule of Saint Benedict is in full effect. Idleness is the enemy of the soul. And silence. That's the invisible mortar that holds this place together. Meals are eaten in quiet. Orders are given with hand signs. Laughter, while not forbidden, is rare, and if it happens, it's more likely during laundry duty than scripture study. Still, the silence isn't oppressive. It hums like a low drone, like the sound of bees in a hive. You begin to notice the tiny things, the way Sister Mary Rose hums tunelessly while kneading bread, the creak of old wood under the cheese presses, the faint squeak of a mouse making a dash under the pantry door. The nuns have adapted to the quiet in strange ways. They've invented entire systems of sign language for kitchen emergencies. Want someone to pass the salt one tap on the table? Need a second ladle of lentils? A flick of the wrist and a raised eyebrow. You get the hang of it quickly. It's less like conversation and more like theater. Very quiet, cabbage-scented theater. Not all smells in the convent are terrible, mind you, but many of them are assertive. You enter the dormitory hall and you're immediately met with a cocktail of aromas, beeswax, damp linen, old soap, and feet. Mostly feet. The sisters share everything: beds, cloaks, socks, and laundry day is only twice a week. You pass a nun airing out her sandals on the windowsill and wonder not for the first time how anyone smells cheese over all this. And yet somehow the cheese room still dominates. There's something about that earthy, yeasty tang that cuts through even the most persistent foot odor. The novices joke that if your nose can't find the cheese shed, you're not cut out for the convent life. You find yourself posted on kitchen duty, though. Truthfully, kitchen is generous. It's more like a cave with a stove. You chop leeks by candlelight. You stir barley porridge with a stick the size of your arm. And all the while, Sister Benedicta, the oldest nun, by several decades, watches you like a hawk guarding her last hen. "Don't burn the onions," she hisses, even though you've only just peeled them. Burnt onions make bitter cheese dreams. You nod solemnly, unsure what that means. Later, you learn she believes bad smells attract demons, and that burnt onions are a particular beacon. No one argues. Sister Benedicta once saw off a band of robbers with just a soup ladle and a prayer. You pass through the refectory long wooden tables, benches scarred with time, and see the sisters eating lunch in near silence. Bread, cheese, boiled roots, and weak ale. Always cheese. It's like the fifth food group here. A visiting friar once joked that if heaven smells like this abbey, he'd prefer purgatory. The nuns responded by gifting him a cheese wheel shaped like the devil. He never came back. Here's the thing within these rules and routines, there's a kind of comfort. Predictability becomes a balm. You know what happens at every hour. You know the sound of the bell, the order of the chores, even the moods of the cows. There's no need to question or decide, just to do. The world outside may churn with war-famine plague, but in here there's only the next prayer and the next wheel of cheese, and there are worse lives to lead. Historians still debate how strict these convent rules really were. Some argue that the silence was more symbolic than total, that nuns found plenty of ways to gossip while kneading dough. Others insist the silence was sacred and enforced with real severity. The truth, as always, probably lies somewhere in between. People are people, even in habits. What's certain is this: the rules shaped the cheese. In a place where talking was rare, hands had to do the thinking. Recipes were passed through gestures, instincts, rhythms. The cheese became an extension of the life-precise patient prayerful. You returned to your quarters, just a straw mattress and a thin woolen blanket, feeling oddly satisfied. You haven't spoken in hours. You smell like leeks and lye soap. Your fingers are raw from scrubbing pots, but your mind is calm. You lie down, close your eyes, and hear the wind brushing against the shutters. Somewhere downstairs a bell chimes softly, and from the cheese shed, you swear you can hear a wheel gently cracking as it cures like a secret being whispered by milk itself. You're barely awake when you're led into the pasture. The sun hasn't yet cleared the tops of the trees, but the mist is already beginning to thin, curling off the dew-wet grass like breath in cold air. The earth is soft underfoot, muddy in patches, and dotted here and there with the hoofprints of your new best friend Agnes. Yes, Agnes, the convent's beloved cow. She's not particularly beautiful. In fact, she looks a bit like a walking loaf of bread with legs broad short and perpetually chewing. But make no mistake, Agnes is a VIP. She's the beating udder of this whole operation, and she knows it. You watch as Sister Agnes, named conveniently after the cow, approaches the animal with a bucket and a practiced patience. The cow looks unimpressed. There's a long, slow blink and a grunt that sounds suspiciously like judgment. But when the milking begins, it's almost musical. Squeeze, squirt, squeeze, squirt. The rhythm is hypnotic, like rain on a wooden roof or a lullaby with no melody. The air smells faintly sweet, like cut hay and warm milk. You're handed a small stool and invited to try. You sit wobbling slightly and wrap your cold fingers around a teat. Agnes turns her head slowly toward you. She does not approve, but she allows it. You learn quickly that cows are picky creatures. They don't like loud noises, sudden movements, or strangers with poor technique. Agnes has booted more than one novice across the pen, but she tolerates you. Or maybe she's just tired. As your hands work, Sister Agnes tells you in a whisper, which in convent terms is practically shouting, that the cow has been with the abbey longer than most of the nuns. She arrived as a calf when the old abbot still lived, and no one's quite sure how she's still producing milk. Divine blessing, maybe. Or cheese-induced immortality. Back in the early days of monastic life, livestock like Agnes weren't just animals, they were lifelines. The rule of St. Benedict emphasized self-sufficiency. Monks and nuns were expected to grow, gather, and craft what they needed. That meant gardens, wells, herbariums, and crucially dairy herds. But cows require land feed time and attention. Not every abbey could afford them. So a single productive cow like Agnes wasn't just a creature. She was a resource, a gift, a four-legged miracle generator. And every morning that miracle came in the form of 2 warm buckets of fresh milk, rich, unpasteurized, and begging to be transformed into something that wouldn't go sour by lunchtime. You carry one of those buckets now, the warm slosh against your knees, both comforting and slightly terrifying. Drop it, and you're not just ruining breakfast, you're interfering with God's work. Sister Benedicta would not be pleased. The walk back to the convent is quiet. You pass a line of geese, haughty and suspicious. A blackbird hops along the low wall, watching you with interest. The garden is waking up parsley, mint, and garlic stretching in the light. Inside the kitchen, the milk is poured into wide, shallow pans. This allows the cream to rise to be skimmed later and used in butter, or as an offering to particularly grumpy abbots. You notice one pan with a fine film already forming. Sister Thomasina leans over and whispers, "That's the good stuff." The cream clings to the faith. You're not entirely sure what she means, but you nod solemnly. As you wipe your hands, she launches into a tale, a story of how once upon a winter, the cow stopped giving milk for 7 days. The entire abbey fasted, prayed, and left tiny rosaries at Agnes's feet. On the 8th day, she produced milk again, twice as much. A Christmas miracle, says Sister Thomasina, or just a very stubborn cow. Historians, for their part, still debate how many of these convent stories are true. There are plenty of monastery records detailing livestock acquisitions, cheese production quotas, even lawsuits over dairy rights. But cows like Agnes, the kind with personality legacy, and maybe a little magic, those are harder to verify. And yet the records do show one thing clearly. Female religious communities across Europe from the 10th to 14th centuries were making cheese in increasing volumes. More than just a subsistence food, it became part of their economic structure. Cheese was traded for ink spices, candles, even parchment for copying sacred texts. So yes, the cow was sacred. Not just symbolically, but practically. The body of the abbey relied on her as surely as it relied on scripture or prayer. You reach down and stroke Agnes's warm flank. She flicks her tail and belches as if to remind you that sainthood is a stretch. Still, you can't help but feel grateful. Not just for the milk, but for the moment. The quiet routine. The grounding presence of a creature that wants nothing more than a patch of sun, a bucket of feed, and a gentle hand. Back in the shed, the milk is beginning to thicken. Coagulation has begun. Tomorrow, the curds will be cut and stirred. But today, you rest. The bells chime, sexed midday prayers. Your knees ache, your hands are damp, and your heart is strangely full. You thank Agnes in a whisper. She farts loudly. You've been accepted. It's not even noon, and yet it feels like you've lived a whole day. The bells ring again, sexed, and you move like molasses down the corridor, trailing behind the others. But there's no time to nap. You've got a new task. Milking the cow. That was the overture. Now comes the main act, cheesemaking. You're sent to the dairy room. It's not glamorous. The door creaks on its hinges, the walls sweat with condensation, and the air is humid, warm, and thick, with a scent that hits somewhere between sourdough and wet wool. A nun in an apron. Yes, they exist, ushers you in. Her name's Sister Clarice, and her hair smells faintly of vinegar. On the table sits this morning's milk, still warm, still trembling faintly. You're given a wide wooden spoon, a nod, and no further instruction. Apparently, the best way to learn is by not ruining things. You begin with gentle stirring. Large vats hold the milk as it slowly changes, guided by time, temperature, and, well, bacteria. That's right. The secret to medieval cheese is good bacteria, and lots of waiting. Sister Clarice leans in. You can't rush the Lord, she says, grinning her curds. She explains that the milk is gently warmed using nothing more than the sun streaming through stained glass and a basin of heated water under the vat. It's not fast, it's not efficient, but it's consistent. And consistency, you learn quickly, is the beating heart of cheesemaking. You ask about rennet. She points to a small jar on the shelf coagulating enzymes extracted from the stomach lining of a calf. It's a medieval marvel and a theological nightmare. 1 part science, 1 part sacrifice, and all parts smell like something the cow probably wouldn't approve of. There are alternatives, you're told. Fig sap, thistle milk, even vinegar and lemon. But nothing quite curdles like rennet. The milk is now thickening just slightly. It's subtle, but it's happening. You dip your spoon and it drags like through a loose pudding. This, Sister Clarice explains, is the start of curdling. The milk is separating solid curds rising from whey. It's transformation in action, and you're part of it. There's a long debate among historians about whether medieval nuns actually understood what they were doing scientifically. The general consensus: probably not. They didn't know about microorganisms, but they had eyes, noses, and lifetimes of practice. They knew which tools made better textures, which days were too damp, which cows gave better milk after eating certain herbs. Their knowledge was intuitive, passed down like liturgy, memorized like psalms. And every nun who stirred that milk added something invisible of herself. You step back as Sister Clarice demonstrates the next step, cutting the curd. Using a long wooden blade, not sharp but precise, she slices the thickened milk into neat cubes. You watch as the curds pull away from the whey, which runs yellow and clear into the grooves of the table. The curds are soft and jiggly like tofu with ambitions. You scoop them gently into a cloth-lined mold. This part takes time. Too fast and you'll trap whey. Too slow and you'll ruin the texture. While you work, you hear her mutter a prayer under her breath, not one from the standard rotation, but something shorter, sweeter, perhaps invented. Holy Mother, bless the milk, make it firm, and make it silk. You smile. Sister Clarice catches you. Not official, she whispers, but it helps. The cheese is now pressed under a stone slab. Slowly, steadily, the remaining whey drips out. You're told this wheel will sit for hours before aging. In the meantime, there are tools to clean vats, to scrub, and floor tiles that demand a brush in your knees. But you're still thinking about the curds. You ask about mistakes. Surely not every cheese wheel is perfect. Sister Clarice nods. We had one that exploded last winter. Fermented wrong. Shot the press right off the shelf. Nearly took out Sister Hildegard. You blink. She was fine, she adds. Tasted awful, though. These are the hidden dramas of convent life. Not political intrigue or royal visitors, but cheeses behaving badly. You find yourself imagining a rogue wheel rolling down the cloister corridor chased by a novice in a panic. You're not alone. There are actual marginalia doodles in the margins of medieval manuscripts that show dancing cheeses, armed wheels, fighting mice, even nuns with cheese halos. Were they jokes, daydreams? Probably both. And here's another thing historians love to debate. How much creativity did nuns really have? Were they strictly bound by their rulebooks, or did they sneak in a little personal flair? The evidence suggests the latter. Some abbeys became famous for their cheese, so famous that rival convents would try to copy their recipes. Secret ingredients, special molds, techniques guarded like relics. And here you are in the thick of it. A spoon in one hand, a smear of curd on your apron, and a newfound respect for the divine power of fermentation. You sit on a low stool, watching the press slowly work its magic. The room is quiet. Outside, you hear birds. Somewhere, someone is singing not a hymn, but something looser, drifting in through a crack in the stone. You breathe deeply. The cheese is coming along. It smells promising. Maybe tomorrow it'll be salted and sent to the cool room. Maybe a month from now it'll sit proudly on the abbot's table. Maybe it'll explode again. You honestly can't wait to find out. The bell rings again, none the mid-afternoon prayer. You rise stiff-legged and glance back at the press. It's not much to look at, but somehow it feels like a masterpiece. You barely finish wiping the last bit of curd from your hands when you're summoned again this time, not by a nun, but by a sound. A wet plop followed by a very distinct slurp. You freeze. That's not cheese. You follow the noise past the pantry through a narrow passageway lined with bundles of dried lavender and crumbling hymnals, and into a room you haven't seen before. It's smaller than the others, lit only by a high window that filters in pale golden light. In the center sits a large wooden vat, ancient, gnarled, blackened with age. The room smells complex. Sour, yes. Sharp, but also woody, earthy, like a forest floor during a warm rain. This is where the mystery begins. Sister Winifred is here. She's one of the older nuns, wiry and bent like a shepherd's crook, with fingers stained yellow from years of cheese rind turning. She's crouched over the vat, murmuring to herself. At first you think it's a prayer. Then you realize she's talking directly to the curds. Easy now, she says softly. Let the rennet work its way in. Be kind. You step forward, curious. The vat is at least 100 years old, maybe more. It's said to have been carved from a single fallen oak dragged up from a nearby bog by oxen in a procession led by singing novices. Whether that's true is debatable, but Sister Winifred swears by the vat. It remembers, she says. The wood soaks in every batch. Every wheel we've ever made leaves something behind. You look closer. The milk in the vat isn't just separating, it's shifting. Tiny bubbles rise to the surface like breath. A thin film quivers across the top, and there's a faint hiss no louder than the sound of a match struck in damp air. It's alive, and then comes the scoop. Sister Winifred pulls out a curved wooden ladle. It's older than the vat, smooth as riverstone, blackened and thin. She dips it and stirs slowly, and the curd yields like silk. The whey flows around her hand in shimmering ribbons. She doesn't look. She just knows. Every time is different, she tells you. Depends on the moon, the cow, the mood of the room. You think she's joking. She isn't. Back in the Middle Ages, superstition and science weren't opposites. They were roommates. Cheese, like most things, had its rituals. Some abbeys only curdled milk on certain days of the week. Others believed the presence of a menstruating woman could sour an entire batch, which makes you glance nervously at the dozen nuns bustling nearby. Then again, these same nuns also believed that prayer could rescue a wheel gone soft. Historians still argue whether these beliefs were rooted in observation or fear. Some say the rituals masked early food science, keeping bacteria levels in check before germ theory had a name. Others suggest the rituals gave the nuns a sense of control in a chaotic, moldy universe. You can see both arguments now. The vat rumbles gently as Sister Winifred pours in the rennet, just a few spoonfuls, but it changes everything. Within minutes, the curds begin to tighten like the surface of a pudding pulled from the fridge too early. And then comes the tricky part. The curd must be cut, not sliced, not hacked cut, in slow, gentle motions that let the whey slip free. You're handed the knife. It's long, dull, and heavy. You feel like you're performing surgery, like this Sister Winifred says, guiding your hand, slow and steady. You're not rushing a meal, you're listening to the milk. You feel ridiculous, but also weirdly focused. The blade glides through the curd. You watch the separation happen in real-time solids, drifting from liquids, white from yellow, new from old. This is where the soul comes in, she says. You raise an eyebrow. She shrugs. You think it's just milk and time nonsense. It takes faith. Faith in the vat, in the tools, in your hands. The nuns believe that this process, this transformation mirrors their own spiritual lives. Take something simple milk, and through heat, time, prayer, and patience, it becomes something nourishing, beautiful, useful, resilient. Just like them, you ladle the curds into a mold. It's wrapped in linen, hand-woven, and reused 100 times. The cloth will shape the cheese, hold it together, give it character. You press gently. The whey seeps out. The curds settle in. There's a moment of stillness. Sister Winifred sets down her ladle, wipes her hands on her apron, and sits beside you. Do you know, she says, some people think the Virgin Mary invented cheese? You blink. Legend says she used her veil as a strainer, made curds on the run to Egypt, gave them to the baby Jesus to keep him quiet. You smile, unsure if it's blasphemy or bedtime story. Either way, it makes sense. After all, here you are cradling a lump of curdled milk in a piece of cloth, watching it slowly become something more. And the vat's still there, still bubbling faintly, still remembering. You step outside for a breath of air. The wind carries a hint of time. The sun has warmed the cloister stones. A bee bumbles past your ear. You can still feel the ladle in your hand, and you wonder what else in your life might be waiting to transform, if only you'd give it time. You return to the cellar not just because you're told to, but because oddly you want to. There's something magnetic about the dark coolness, the heavy air that smells of patience and salt and just a hint of mushroom. It's quiet here, but not silent. You hear the occasional creak of wood, the slow drip of condensation, and the faintest whisper of linen brushing against stone. This is where the cheeses come to age. At first, it feels like a crypt stone shelves dim light and little air circulation. But instead of saints' bones, this crypt houses cheese wheels, small, large, pale, golden, wrinkled, firm, and some so fuzzy with mold, you wouldn't be surprised if they spoke Latin and tried to convert you. Sister Gertrude is waiting. She's small, square-shouldered, and wears an apron stiff with dried whey. You get the feeling that if you dropped a wheel, she'd forgive you eventually. Maybe. Come, she says, let's meet the choir. You don't understand until you realize each row of cheeses is labeled with a name. Not just the batch date or type, but actual names. Teresa, Hildegard, Euphemia. One is even labeled Godfrey. You raise a brow. Sister Gertrude shrugs. They develop better when you talk to them. You follow her down the row. She taps the side of one wheel with a knuckle and tilts her head. Still a bit sharp. Needs another week. And then she opens the linen wrap on another. It's a little alarming. The rind is sticky, orange, slightly furry in a way that triggers some ancient flight instinct. You step back. It's supposed to look like that, she says, completely serious. You believe her, mostly. Here's the thing you're learning fast. Cheese isn't born pretty. It ages into beauty. Slowly. Through mold. Through time. Through turning and brushing. And yes, naming. The cellar is a living ecosystem. The walls breathe moisture. The cheeses exhale ammonia mold spores and mystery. Every few days they're rotated, brushed, checked for unwanted growths and invited bacterial parties. Some abbeys even sang psalms as they did it, whether for acoustics or inspiration, no one's sure. You get a brush and begin on Mildred. She's a small wheel squat and crusty. As you scrape away a layer of bloom, you catch a faint smell of hazelnuts and wet earth. Beneath the crust, the cheese is transforming, losing moisture, gaining sharpness, becoming itself. Historians still marvel at how much trial and error went into this process. There were no thermometers, no vacuum sealing, no fancy lab equipment, just centuries of hands-on learning prayers and a willingness to sniff something that might kill you, or delight you. Some convents even kept cheese journals. You imagine them now ink-stained fingers jotting down the behavior of Bernadette Batch 12 in the margins of psalters. One famous abbey in northern France reportedly had a whole scriptorium wing dedicated to cheese experiments. Most of those scrolls were later eaten by mice, or maybe monks. Accounts vary. You glance around at the rows upon rows of wheels. It's not just storage, it's archive. Memory. Some wheels are destined for feast days. Others are meant as payment to nobles, to bishops, to traveling minstrels, who can be bribed into silence with a nice chunk of smoky Gouda. But some wheels, some stay. Sister Gertrude points to a high shelf near the back. There, covered in thick cloth, are 3 large rounds that are never touched. The Holy Trinity, she says, as if you should have guessed. We let them age indefinitely, for balance. You ask what happens if someone eats them. She stares at you for a long moment. No one eats them. Fair enough. You help rotate a few wheels, your hands now sticky with rind and salt. The smell is clinging to your sleeves. You're not even sure you mind. There's something grounding in this process. Time loses its usual shape. Everything stretches and slows like the cheese itself, softening, hardening, changing. And here's something unexpected mold is good. The right mold anyway. Too much penicillium and you'll get a bitter rind. Too little geotrichum and the surface stays slimy. But just enough of each balanced like prayer and silence, and the cheese becomes whole. Even the worst wheels, the ones that crack bulge or smell like wet wool and regret, are repurposed. Sister Gertrude says they melt them into soup or bury them in the garden. Cheese returns to the earth, she says. Like all of us. You ask if there's ever been a cheese so bad they had to perform an exorcism. She doesn't answer. You both scrape Godfrey in silence for a while. Later, you rest on a cool bench at the far end of the cellar. The air is still. A candle flickers on a nearby barrel. You feel serene. Not clean, definitely not, but peaceful. You feel like one of the wheels yourself, just sitting, breathing slowly, and waiting to become something else. There's no rush here, no urgency, just the promise of change if you give it time. A bell rings faintly echoing through the stone halls. It's Vesper's evening prayer. You rise, brush the crumbs of mold from your lap, and follow the light out of the cellar. Behind you, the cheeses settle in for the night. Vespers glides by like a dream. Your knees ache, your back protests every bow. But there's a rhythm to the psalms that smooths your thoughts like the brushing of a rind. Afterward, the sisters drift through the cloisters murmuring rosaries or quietly tending their chores. The abbey feels like it's exhaling its breath soft and slow as the dusk seeps in. You, however, are headed somewhere more pungent. By now, you've earned a small rite of passage access to the second cellar. It's not on any official map, and it smells like the inside of an old boot wrapped in wet moss. In a good way. This is where the cheeses sleep longer. Sister Anicetta leads you. She's impossibly tall, always hunched slightly to avoid bonking her head on door frames. Her voice is like soft gravel, and her habit is permanently dusted with flour ash and salt. She doesn't talk much, she sniffs. She opens the cellar door and inhales deeply. Yes, the St. Jerome is ready to flip. You ask no questions. Inside, it's darker than the main cellar, colder too. This is where the special cheeses go. The triple-aged, washed-rind relic tier wheels that only the abbess is allowed to taste or gift to visiting bishops. They rest on marble slabs, not wood. Wrapped in fine linen, sprinkled with ashes from sacred herbs. You spot one wheel crusted in lavender blossoms and salt crystals. Another is wrapped entirely in rose petals, like a cheese mummy. You think about the tools used here. Simple ones. Wooden paddles, brass needles, linen, soaked in brine. Everything smells ancient. You kneel beside Sister Anicetta and help her flip one of the larger wheels. It resists you. It's heavy like a wheel of fortune or doom. "This one's 5 years old," she whispers. "We call her Mother Magdalene." You nearly drop her. Careful, she's developing a split personality. You're not sure if she's joking. There's a quiet moment as you watch her inspect the rind, tapping it with her knuckle, sniffing it like a suspicious librarian, even holding a tiny brass spoon to scrape off a smidge for tasting. She offers you the smallest flake. It looks harmless. It tastes like cave, with a hint of peppercorn honey and something you can only describe as monastic resolve. You nod slowly, eyes watering. "That's the good mold," she says. "Only comes in after the 6th brushing." You glance around. These cheeses aren't just food. They're relics, icons of flavor, and they're treated accordingly. In fact, some convents did literally bless their cheese. Priests would perform seasonal rituals to ensure healthy fermentation. In more superstitious circles, a misbehaving cheese could be sprinkled with holy water or left beneath a crucifix overnight. Whether it worked or not is debatable, but it certainly added gravitas to lunch. And these cheeses needed all the divine help they could get. Aging was risky. Temperature shifts, mold infections, mice. Oh yes, mice. You hear a scritch behind one of the slabs. Sister Aniceta doesn't flinch. She pulls a wooden stick from under her apron and gives a single tap on the stone. The scratching stops. "They listen," she says. "Of course they do." In fact, some abbeys developed relationships with their rodents. Cheese thieves, yes, but also unlikely informants. A sudden drop in mouse activity could mean a temperature issue or something worse. Nuns would leave out bits of failed rinds as decoys, steering the mice away from the good stuff. There's even one surviving recipe book with a section titled "Offerings for the Small Thieves." Historians are still debating that one. Sister Aniceta walks you to the back of the cellar. Here the air thickens. A single candle lights the space, and the shelves hold only 3 wheels, untouched, wrapped in waxed cloth sealed with red string. "These," she says, "are the vigil cheeses." You blink. They're made during Holy Week. Never tasted, never sold. They just sit. For penance. You ask why. "No one remembers," she says. "We just keep doing it." That you're learning is the secret ingredient in monastic cheese-making ritual. Even when the meaning gets lost, the shape remains. 1,000 small actions repeated faithfully become something more than habit. They become culture, memory, identity. You help rotate one last wheel. It oozes slightly. That's good. Or at least no one screams. You climb back up the stairs, leaving the cool, mold-scented dark behind. Back in the fresh air of the cloister, the moon is up, casting silver onto the stone floor. A breeze rustles the herb garden. Somewhere, a bell rings slowly. Complain. The final prayer of the day. You walk a little slower now. The rhythm of the abbey has caught you. Each moment leads into the next. Curds to mold. Prayer to silence. Milk to mystery. You lie in your straw-filled mattress once more, the scent of cheese still clinging to your sleeves. You stare at the stone ceiling and smile. You didn't eat any dinner, but you're somehow full. By now, you're starting to understand cheese isn't just food in this abbey, it's diplomacy. A wheel of the right texture and flavor can do more than fill bellies. It can buy candles, secure alliances, even smooth over a well-timed theological disagreement. This morning, you're headed not to the dairy or cellar, but to the convent's front hall. A rare thing. You're not alone. Sister Euphemia is with you, bustling ahead with a burlap sack slung over one shoulder like some sort of culinary Santa Claus. Inside the bag, cheese, naturally. This isn't an ordinary delivery. You're bringing it to the nearby monastery, an exchange of goods favors and mutual toleration. The monks, according to Sister Euphemia, are pleasant enough if you like men who argue over Latin pronunciation and never salt their turnips. The abbey doesn't just trade cheese. They trade types of cheese. Soft, crumbly rounds for the friar's dried apples. A firm, nutty cheese for beeswax. And in one memorable incident, a particularly aromatic blue wheel was traded for a set of glass rosary beads and a promise never to bring that cheese again. You walk the winding path out of the abbey gates, the morning mist curling low across the hills. Sister Euphemia chatters as she walks, pointing out landmarks with a nod of her chin. That grove site of a cheese competition gone terribly wrong. That pond once used to cool aging wheels during a heat wave until the frogs staged a revolt. You're not entirely sure she's joking. When you arrive at the monastery, the contrast is immediate. The monks' compound is larger, heavier, and smells faintly of fish stew and ink. A brother greets you. Brother Giles with a face like a loaf of rye, and a beard that's definitely housing something sentient. He eyes the sack. Bringing gifts. Sister Euphemia smiles sweetly. Only if you've improved your bread since Lent. This is the ritual barbed compliments, passive-aggressive blessings, and the ceremonial cheese presentation. You're handed the honor of unwrapping the top wheel, a pale yellow round with a delicate bloomy rind. Brother Giles sniffs it, snorts, then breaks into a smile. Much improved over last year, he says. Doesn't smell like repentance. Yours still smells like penance, Sister Euphemia counters. But we take what we get. The monks offer you weak beer and hard biscuits. You sit under an archway while the two religious communities trade small talk and larger wedges of dairy diplomacy. This is how things got done in the Middle Ages. Kings had scribes, popes had bulls, monks and nuns, they had cheese. Some abbeys became known for their specific styles. Runny blues, firm tums, floured goat cheeses aged in bell towers. Nuns would walk for days to exchange cultures, both microbial and conversational, gathering recipes, the way others gathered relics. And yes, sometimes it was bribery. There's a story Sister Euphemia tells, perhaps apocryphal, perhaps not of an abbess in Normandy who settled a dispute over land boundaries by sending a wheel of triple-aged ash-rubbed cheese to a neighboring bishop. He ruled in her favor. The cheese became known as Bishop's Mercy. Historians are still trying to find a surviving sample. Back in the abbey, the return from the monastery is celebrated with a modest feast. Bread, dried fruit, and of course cheese. The good stuff this time. You're allowed to join. One wheel is cracked open in front of everyone. It's dense, marbled with veins of greenish blue, and smells like it's been plotting something in the cellar for years. You're hesitant, but you try it. It's sharp, like a sermon delivered sideways. Salty, grassy, and somehow oddly comforting. Like the smell of old parchment and warm wool. You take another bite. After the meal, the abbess herself stands. A rare event. She nods toward the guests, the novices, and even you. Blessed are those who transform the simple, she says. Milk into cheese. Time into prayer. Hunger into gratitude. It's not just a prayer, it's doctrine. This abbey runs on transformation. And not just in vats. Later that evening, as you clean the platters and brush crumbs from the refectory floor, you notice a smaller wheel of cheese sitting off to the side, cracked, imperfect, maybe slightly overaged. You ask what it's for. Sister Euphemia shrugs. That one, that's for Brother Giles next time. You smile. A peace offering or a warning. Outside, dusk is falling. The wind carries the smell of thyme and charcoal. Somewhere beyond the garden walls, a donkey brays in complaint and someone laughs. You pause, looking up at the sky. For a moment, you wonder if there's any modern substitute for this kind of exchange. Could emails be softened with cheddar? Could office meetings benefit from a well-aged brie? Probably. But for now, you're here in a time when alliances were salted, fermented, and sealed in cloth. And you wouldn't trade that for anything. You wake the next morning to a rather unusual argument echoing off the chapel walls. It's not about scripture or prayers, or even the finer points of Latin declension. No, today's disagreement is much more flavorful. Brie is a sin, says Sister Scholastica flatly. Only if it runs, counters Sister Magdalena, hands on her hips, and a stubborn curl peeking out from under her coif. You're sitting near the cloister well peeling potatoes for the midday meal when you overhear the debate. Apparently, the question of the best convent cheese has stirred old loyalties and regional rivalries, and not for the first time. The abbey you're in is a Benedictine house, strict, orderly, fond of rules and firmness. Their signature cheese is dense, slightly crumbly, and aged until it can be sliced like wood but melts in the mouth like sun-warmed butter. The Cistercians 2 towns over. They prefer soft cheeses, fluffy, spreadable, nearly drinkable if left out too long. They claim it's more humble. The Benedictines say it's laziness, disguised as piety. This has led, as Sister Euphemia informs you while peeling alongside you, to what she calls the Great Cheese Schism. I'm only half joking, she adds, raising an eyebrow. And she's not wrong. Documents from the 12th century show that certain monastic orders became fiercely protective over their cheese styles. Some even wrote them into their rule books. One abbess in southern Burgundy reportedly excommunicated a nun for using thyme in a wheel intended to be herb-free. It was later reversed, but the damage to that convent's reputation and dinner menu lingered for years. You wouldn't think mold could divide the faithful, but here you are. Inside the scriptorium, you get a peek at one of the oldest recipe manuscripts in the abbey's possession. The ink is faded, the pages browned with time, and the occasional splash of whey. The script is meticulous, and tucked into the margins are tiny notes and doodles. Cows with halos, wheels of cheese with smiling faces, and one nun shaking a finger at a wheel that's clearly melting. This is where we record everything, says Sister Celestina, the abbey's archivist. Measurements, weather, cow temperament. Whether Sister Imelda was cranky that day. It all affects the flavor. You raise a brow. Cranky cheese. Absolutely, she nods. Emotional turbulence curdles faster. It's absurd. It's delightful. And if you believe what you're tasting, probably true. She flips to a specific page. Here, she says, pointing. Benedictine Brie. Developed during a particularly long Lent when we weren't allowed to chew between sunrise and sunset. You blink. So they invented a cheese to sip. Spread, she corrects gently. But yes, this you realize is where theology and culinary creativity intersect. When food is restricted, monks and nuns don't eat less, they eat differently. More cleverly. Aged cheeses can be shaved so thin they melt on the tongue. Fresh cheeses can be whipped into porridge. Some convents even devised cheese drinks, sweetened, spiced, barely solid, technically not meals. You head back to the dairy room in a daze. How can cheese cause so many arguments and solve so many problems? Sister Scholastica is waiting there, arms crossed, guarding two wheels on the table, like a knight with her dragons. These are ours, she says. One is Benedictine firm golden, crusted with cracked pepper and rosemary. The other is Cistercian white, oozing slightly wrapped in damp fig leaves. You're given a knife. Not to judge, just to appreciate. You cut the Benedictine first. It crumbles slightly at the edge, but softens on the blade's warmth. Nutty with a smell like toasted oats. Then the Cistercian. It clings to the knife shiny and slick. The scent is earthy like morning fog on moss-covered stone. You taste them both. They're nothing alike. They're both perfect. You see, says Sister Scholastica, one is structure. The other is surrender. You smile. Sounds like different paths to the same goal. She snorts. Don't let the abbot hear you say that. He still thinks soft cheeses are for heretics. Later that evening, the abbey hosts a rare event, the Cheese Table of Unity. It's informal. Quiet, but deeply felt. Each nun contributes a wedge or round from her preferred method flavor or heritage. The table is small, but overflowing smoky goat cheese, garlic-infused wheels, ash-coated rounds, soft curds, mixed with wildflowers. No labels, no rules, only knives, and silence, and the occasional moan of culinary ecstasy. It's not just about taste. It's about witness, heritage, choice. Some nuns prefer to chew, some to spread. Some only nibble eyes closed as if meditating. You try everything, even the soft blue you once swore never to touch again, and you find peace in the variety. Because in this place, this damp-stoned, brine-soaked corner of medieval life cheese isn't just sustenance. It's identity. And the more flavors it offers, the closer it seems to whatever holiness is hiding in the cracks between meals. Midnight in the abbey is not truly silent. You might think it would be stone walls, shuttered windows, sisters deep in their beds, breath rising slow and warm under woolen covers. But the abbey has its own nocturnal music, distant rustles of habits brushing stone, the creak of ancient beams shifting in the cold, the occasional cough or muffled prayer whispered in sleep. And tonight there's another sound, a scratch, scratch, scratch that's coming from the scriptorium. You slip out of your cot candle in hand and pad softly down the corridor. The air smells of ink and old paper. You expect to find Sister Celestina asleep at her desk, but instead you find a scroll open wide, a mouse sitting squarely in the middle of it, and Sister Imelda crouched nearby holding a wedge of cheese like it's a peace treaty. This is not unusual. Mice love the recipes, she whispers, particularly the ones with honey. You watch as she gently coaxes the mouse away from the parchment, luring it toward the corner where she's constructed what she calls the diplomas nest. Inside, breadcrumbs, lavender shredded wool, and of course a crumb of aged hard cheese. This might seem silly, but here's the thing: mice were once a chronic problem in convents, especially cheese-loving mice. Marginalia, those quirky doodles drawn in the margins of medieval manuscripts, frequently show tiny rodents stealing cheese, carrying it on spears, or being chased by angry nuns armed with ladles and righteous fury. In one manuscript, a mouse is shown holding court over a cheese wheel, while a cat looks on clearly outmaneuvered. Some scholars think these illustrations were metaphors perhaps about gluttony, or temptation, or the constant battle between sacred order and sneaky chaos. Others think they were just funny. You watch Sister Imelda copy out a recipe in careful looping Latin, stopping now and then to flick a crumb toward the corner. Keeps them friendly, she murmurs. An unhappy mouse is a recipe thief. You look closer at the scroll. It's a cheese recipe one that uses fresh herbs, pressed blossoms, and a complicated twist of salt layering that takes 10 days. At the top, drawn in red ink, is a tiny wheel of cheese with what looks like a halo. They called this one Angel's Round Sister, Imelda says. Only made once a year. Supposedly inspired by a vision. You ask if it still gets made. She shakes her head. Too temperamental. Won't set right unless the weather's exact and the cows fed marjoram 3 days before. You blink. She shrugs. We've tried. It's split open like a heretic at a feast. You file that image away and move on. Over the next few days, you begin to realize just how many cheese recipes exist within these scrolls. Dozens, maybe hundreds. Each one slightly different, some with spices, others with flowers, some using wine, or goat's milk, or sheep's milk, or curdled tears of sorrow. That one you think is metaphorical. But many of the recipes are annotated. Notes like "too soft, Sister Alda sneezed near the vat," or "resulted in mild chaos, try again after Easter." One even has an actual bite taken out of the corner. This isn't just documentation, it's storytelling. It's one of the few places in the Abbey where individual voices peek through. Among the prayers and psalms, the rules and rituals here lie the side comments, the private jokes, the frustrations and quiet triumphs of women working day after day in a world of milk and mold. You ask Sister Celestina why the cheese recipes aren't copied into the official kitchen books. She smiles, eyes twinkling. Too dangerous. If the monks get them, we'll never hear the end of it. Which brings you to the cheese rivalries of record. Yes, it's real. Hidden in one of the Abbey's older ledgers is a parchment labeled Dispute Casse, the cheese disputes. It details at least 7 known events where convents and monasteries engaged in full-blown cheese competitions, complete with neutral judges, fasting periods beforehand, and elaborate presentations involving silver platters and carved cheese rinds in the shape of biblical scenes. One competition ended in disaster when a mold-ripened wheel exploded mid-judging, covering a bishop in what was described as a smell unworthy of ecclesiastical tolerance. He reportedly gave penance to everyone in the room. You learn of Sister Aurelia, an abbess so determined to protect her recipe that she encoded it in Latin, reversed every line, and hid it inside a scroll about St. Hildegard's dietary guidelines. It was only rediscovered 2 decades later by a novice who mistook it for a cleaning schedule. That cheese lacrimadae or tear of God is still made today, on feast days, in absolute silence. You begin to understand why some convent cheeses never made it beyond their stone walls. It wasn't greed, it was reverence. Each wheel represented not just labor and nourishment, but a moment in time, a season, a saint's day. A particular cow's mood, the quiet resolve of a novice, doing it right for the first time. Recipes weren't just formulas. They were memories set to age. One night you dream of a cheese vault hidden deep below the abbey, filled with glowing wheels that hum. Gregorian chant if you listen closely. A mouse in a wimple serves you a slice and tells you, "This one remembers the flood of 1213. You wake up smiling. You head to morning prayers with cheese on the brain. And honestly, that feels pretty holy. Morning finds you in the kitchen again, but today there's a different energy. Something's in the air besides the usual steam from boiling barley and the tang of pickled cabbage. There's a hum of expectation. Nuns pass each other with glances that are almost conspiratorial. Even the chickens seem unusually smug. You learn quickly why. It's loophole day, not an official feast, not written in any rulebook, but well known in every abbey kitchen across the land. Loophole day is when the convent gets creative. stretching the definitions of fasting just enough to allow for indulgences. Cheese, mostly. But not just cheese. Cheese with flair. The tradition, make the most luxurious dish you possibly can, without technically breaking your vow of abstinence. This you quickly understand as an art form. The fasting rules are strict. During Lent or on certain holy days, meat is forbidden. So is rich food. But cheese. That's a gray area. Some church authorities allowed it. Others did not. So the nuns invented a workaround dishes that were penitential in spirit, but joyfully dairy-laden in practice. You're assigned to Sister Matilda, an unassuming woman with flour always on her sleeves and a brain like a theological knife. She explains the recipe of the day gratitude loaves. Sounds humble, doesn't it? Then she shows you the ingredients: honey-soaked raisins, crushed almonds, fresh curds mixed with rosewater and orange peel, all kneaded into soft wheat dough and folded into tiny cheese-stuffed parcels. Each loaf gets a cross carved into the top for modesty, she says. The smell alone could convert a monk. You ask whether this really counts as fasting food. She shrugs. We're not feasting, we're appreciating. This is a thing you're learning. Medieval nuns were rule followers, but they were also human. Hungry, practical, and occasionally mischievous. They found ways to nourish their bodies and their spirits, even if it meant navigating some very cheesy gray areas. One abbey in Spain, according to legend, invented a dish so rich, cheese whipped with honey, egg yolks, saffron, and pine nuts, that they served it on slate to remind the eater of death. Memento mori, they'd say, but finish your plate. The church, for its part, was divided. Some bishops frowned on dairy during fasts. Others declared it a gift from God's gentler creatures. One papal advisor reportedly said, "Cheese is but the shadow of flesh, it tempts not the spirit." No one was quite sure what that meant, but cheese continued flowing. You roll the gratitude loaves into their final shape, tuck the corners with reverent fingers, and set them by the fire. The warmth of the hearth, the scent of curd and spice, the quiet murmur of Latin from the hallway, it feels like worship, but edible. And then someone enters the kitchen carrying a wheel. It's enormous. A triple-stacked, ash-rubbed, herb-flecked monstrosity known simply as the loophole. This is Sister Ambrosia's domain. She wheels it in like royalty, places it in the center of the room, and begins slicing. The scent is divine wood smoke, rosemary roasted garlic, and a faint whisper of wine. You ask quietly how she made it. She leans in. Started it last Pentecost, she says. Fed it fennel brine every fortnight. Read to it from the Book of Lamentations during thunderstorms. You wait for a punchline. There is none. You eat your slice on a bench beside the garden wall, watching the clouds drift lazily across the sky. The cheese is sharp and smoky, layered with complexity. It tastes like a secret. And you realize that in a world ruled by structure where days are divided by bells and breaths are counted in psalms, this creativity, this tiny rebellion, is its own kind of devotion. Later, you help serve the loaves in the refectory. No one talks. But the eye contact fierce. One nod from Sister Thomasina tells you your loaves have passed the test. Sister Clarice mouths something that might be more orange peel next time, and you nod humbled. You notice the abbess gets the corner slice, naturally. That evening after Compline, you help clean the platters. You find a single leftover wedge from the loophole and carefully wrap it in linen, stashing it behind the turnip barrels. Not for selfishness, just preservation. Art must be saved. Before bed, you hear laughter echo down the cloister hallway. Real laughter. Not scandalous, not rebellious, just the kind that bubbles up when you've eaten something better than expected. That's the magic of Loophole Day. It doesn't break the rules. It just dances at their edges, making space for joy within the lines drawn in salt and ink. You lie in your cot full, but not stuffed peaceful, but pleasantly guilty. Tomorrow, the fast resumes. The loaves will return to dry crusts and thin broth. But tonight you fell asleep with cheese on your breath and a smile behind your veil. You wake before the bell. This doesn't happen often, and it doesn't happen on purpose. But something's buzzing through the abbey today. Whispers, glances, and energy that's less contemplative and more curious. Sister Marin appears at your door with a finger pressed to her lips and a small, tightly wrapped bundle in her hands. You're going somewhere. She leads you out past the herb garden, past the root cellar, and down a slope behind the abbey, where moss creeps up the stones, and the grass grows tall enough to hide secrets. You push through a thicket and emerge at a small wooden door, half hidden in the earth, held shut with a loop of knotted rope. This is not on any map. It creaks open. Inside darkness, cool and moist. You step down into what feels like the abbey's lungs. It's a secondary chamber older than the main one. Hidden, unofficial, and as Sister Marin explains in a whisper, strictly off record, this is where the personal cheeses live. Not the ones made for tithes trade, or even abbey consumption. These are secret recipes wheels and molds born from late-night experiments, whispered ideas, and moments of culinary courage. Some have names. Others only initials burned into their rinds. A few are sealed with wax and prayers. This Sister Marin says is where Abbess Audrey made her miracle. You've heard of Audrey. Long gone. Her name appears in scrolls and in the stories told during cold evenings, when even the broth tastes of nostalgia. But this is the first time someone mentions her cheese. Sister Marin pulls a wheel from a carved niche in the wall. It's wrapped in dark linen and tied with red thread. She places it on a table like an offering. No one's tasted it in years, she says. But we're opening it today. You ask why. She grins. Because the abbess is visiting. Ah, Abbess Immaculata, regal hawk-eyed, and a woman whose silence is rumored to be sharper than any cheddar. She's due to arrive at dusk, and Sister Marin has made it her personal mission to honor the occasion with something that walks the line between divine revelation and culinary danger. You unwrap the wheel together. Slowly. The scent hits you like a parable, strong, sweet, floral, and smoky. Not smoke from fire, but from time. As if the cheese has remembered every herb ever pressed into its skin. It glows faintly in the lantern light. You cut it. Inside, it's marble-like gold, and cream swirls with fine veins of pale green. The texture is like velvet that flirts with crumble. You taste a flake, just one, and you feel it. Like opening a window in a room you didn't know was stuffy. Like finding an old hymn book where one of the pages hums. It's sharp and soft at once. Not loud, but resonant. You don't want to swallow it. You just want it to keep going. Sister Marin nods. She aged it in silence. Prayed over it for 7 weeks. Used curds from 3 cows fed on nothing but marigolds. You ask why she stopped making it. Too good, she says simply. She was afraid it would tempt pride. That's the paradox. You make something holy, something extraordinary, and then you bury it behind turnips and forget it exists, lest it become vanity. Historians never found any mention of this cheese in the Abbey records. No recipe, no ingredients, no mention of flavor. Just one note in a side margin of a prayer book, a wheel set aside too sacred for supper. The abbess arrives at sunset. The courtyard hushes as her carriage rolls in. She steps down tall and silent, a presence more than a person. The sisters line up to greet her, heads bowed. The evening meal is prepared modestly, barley stew, hard bread, dried apple. Nothing fancy. But at the end of the table, waiting under a linen cloth, is the miracle wheel. No announcement, no speech. Just a quiet unveiling, a shared breath, and a single slice placed before the abbess. She tastes it. Time stops. You watch her face expecting praise or silence, or that slight narrowing of the eyes that signals judgment. Instead, a smile. Just a flicker. But unmistakable. She places her hand gently over the rest of the slice. Not claiming it, just holding it. The sisters exhale. That night, the abbey feels lighter. Not jubilant, not loud. Just full. Like something long buried has been remembered. Not shouted. Just honored. Back in your cot, you smell the rind still clinging to your fingers. You think of Audrey long gone, who prayed over cheese, and then walked away from it, never knowing whether it would be tasted again. You wonder how many other masterpieces sit forgotten in cellars, or buried in notes between psalms, waiting for someone to uncover them. Maybe not all miracles are meant to be shared, but sometimes they are, and they taste like marigolds and patience. After the miracle cheese, the abbey should have returned to normal. Should have. But nothing stirs up a cloistered community quite like the scent of glory, especially one aged in silence and wrapped in mystery. It starts subtly. A little more bustle in the dairy. Recipes fetched from forgotten scrolls. Curds being stirred with a tad more fervor. Sister Clarice is seen muttering something about elderflower rinds. while Sister Euphemia asks if anyone remembers how to extract color from saffron without offending the Lord or the budget. Then one morning the whispers reach you. There's been an accusation. Fraud, someone murmurs near the bread oven. Heretical mold, someone else adds by the herb wall. The truth, as always, is somewhere between nonsense and dangerous. Apparently, Sister Cordelia, quiet, meticulous, fond of goats, has been aging a wheel in secret. Not in defiance, but in passion. The twist. It's not strictly in line with the Abbey's agreed-upon fasting rules. She brushed it with clarified butter. Sister Scholastica says scandalized. Twice. The room gasps. Butter, technically speaking, falls under the flesh-born prohibitions in stricter interpretations of Lenten law. But cheese is ambiguous, liminal. Safe until you smear it with butter and hide it behind the ginger preserves. The abbess hears of it by vespers, naturally. You're present during the inquiry, not a trial. Just a very quiet conversation held in the refectory, while everyone else pretends to not be eavesdropping over their watery broth. Abbess Immaculata sits still as a stone. Sister Cordelia stands hands clasped. She does not deny it. I wanted to create something new, she says, voice firm. A wheel that sings, something that melts and lifts the soul. And the butter, the abbess asks. Clarified, Cordelia corrects softly. Purified. The abbess raises an eyebrow so sharp it could slice curd. Sister Cordelia continues. I kept it separate. I never served it. I just needed to know if it was possible. And there it is. Not disobedience, not even pride. Just that irrepressible itch, the curiosity that lives in all makers, all artists, all monks who mix ink or nuns who stir cream. The abbess sighs long, deep. Then she says, "Where is it?" Gasps from the shadows. You retrieve it. The wheel is small, round, and softly golden. It glows faintly in the candlelight like something that's been listening closely for months. The cloth is peeled back. The room holds its breath. The abbess cuts a slice. She doesn't eat it. She simply holds it to her nose, closes her eyes, and places it back down. No more, she says. Not this season. No punishment, no condemnation. But no permission either. The wheel is wrapped labeled "Defer until Pentecost" and placed in the vault. It becomes legend instantly. Later, as you clean up, Sister Cordelia approaches you. Do you think I was wrong? She asks. You think of the wheel, the glow, the butter, the risk. You shake your head. No, just early. That's the thing about convent life. It hums with patience. Seasons are measured not in weeks, but in wheels. In rinds thickening, in curds firming, in prayers muttered while watching milk break into parts. But even here, behind high walls and strict bells, invention stirs. Historians often focus on the rigidity of religious life, the rules, the obedience, the endless repetition. But what they miss is the quiet, sacred pushback, the experiments done at dusk, the formulas scribbled in margins, the wheels turned ever so slightly off the standard path. Some abbeys encouraged this, others crushed it, but always someone pushed just a bit further. You learn about Sister Agnes of Vienna, who once fermented cheese using wine instead of brine. Her abbey accused her of indulgence until they tasted it. Then they wrote a hymn about it. You never find the music, but the lyrics survive. They rhyme milk with silk, and you appreciate the effort. You also read about a nun in Wales who created a cheese with 7 layers each, aged separately. She called it Salter Wheel. She died before finishing it. No one's ever replicated the feat. Sister Cordelia returns to the dairy the next morning as if nothing happened. She hums while she stirs, uses regular brine, keeps her head low. But when she thinks no one is looking, she adds a pinch of something golden to the curds, just a flicker of risk. You say nothing. The abbey moves on. The scandal fades. The butter wheel rests in silence. And somewhere in the dark, a new idea begins to take shape. Because in a place where everything is made by hand, where time is thick, and flavors deepen by the hour, there is always room for something new. It's market day. This happens only once a month, and the abbey prepares like it's a liturgical festival. Buckets are scrubbed, wheels are polished. Cloth wraps are ironed flat and tied with hand-spun thread. Even the goat gets her ears brushed in case she ends up in the background of a haggling scene. You're allowed to go along this time not just to carry baskets, but to watch, to see what happens when cheese leaves its cloister. The walk to the village is long, winding down hills and past hedgerows teeming with bees. Sister Euphemia leads the way, humming a tune that may or may not be about tax evasion. Behind her, Sister Clarice balances a stack of flat, wide wheels, wrapped in waxed linen. You're holding the most important basket samples. They are, in a word, pungent. The village square is already buzzing. Traders have arrived from nearby towns with sacks of flour bolts of rough wool, bundles of leeks, jars of honey, and yes, rival cheese. It's a battlefield disguised as a market. The abbey's stall is modest. A wooden table. A cloth banner with the faint image of St. Gertrude holding a wheel like a holy relic. No prices are listed. That would be crass. Instead, deals are made through whispers, glances, and the occasional passive-aggressive blessing. A local merchant strolls up, eyes the samples, and smirks. Still doing your blessed ash rub, eh? Sister Clarice smiles sweetly, still pretending your rinds aren't just mildew. You learn quickly that market day is part diplomacy, part performance. There are the pilgrims who'll buy anything made by the Holy Sisters, and pay extra if it smells faintly of sanctity. There are the nobles' stewards who ask far too many questions, and always request a sample for the Lord's hound just in case. And then there are the cheesemongers, serious men and women with serious noses. They poke, they sniff. One even taps a wheel and listens like it's a bell. You serve your first sample, a square cut from a soft, creamy wheel, flecked with rosemary and lemon peel. A child eats it and giggles. His mother buys 3. It's a victory. Other wheels don't fare as well. One monk from the neighboring monastery declares a smoky Tommy blasphemously complex, and another claims he found a hair in the blue mold. Sister Euphemia calmly reminds him that monks also shed, and offers him a slice of a milder, safer option. The abbey doesn't just trade for coin. You barter for beeswax, preserved plums, and somehow a small carved lute with one broken string. For the novices, says Sister Scholastica, or the mice, what strikes you most is how alive the cheese becomes out here. It's no longer cloistered. It breathes in the open air. It's argued over, bitten, praised, dismissed, debated. It's not reverent anymore, it's real. Back at the abbey, the cheeses rest in silence. Here they perform, and that you learn is essential. Monastic life isn't just about devotion within walls. It's about offering something to the world, something crafted in stillness, but meant to move outward. Cheese, oddly enough, is the bridge. You hear stories from other traders. In southern France, nuns lace their cheese with lavender and wrap it in psalms. In northern Italy, a convent ages soft cheeses in ceramic jars, sealed with beeswax and prayer. One merchant claims to have tasted a wheel so holy it made him weep, and proposed to a basil vendor. You suspect exaggeration. Still, it proves the point: convent cheese isn't just food, it's lore. The abbey leaves market day with fewer wheels and heavier baskets. The coins are modest, but the exchanges are rich. Stories, recipes, advice on mold control. Sister Clarice even trades a wedge for a roll of saffron cloth, which she intends to use for purely ecclesiastical embroidery, and definitely not to line her cheesecloth press. On the walk home, you're tired, but content. You think of the wheels now sitting in pantries, kitchens, carts, and noble dining halls, little pieces of the abbey scattered like seeds. You helped make them. You helped carry them. And now they live on beyond you. Back in the convent, the remaining cheeses are tended with fresh eyes. Some will stay. Some will be offered. Some will wait for years in the cool dark, whispering their intentions to the air. And you realize something. Even the quietest life leaves a trace. Even a wheel of cheese can carry love. You fall asleep that night with sore feet, wax on your sleeves, and a small sliver of leftover market cheese tucked under your pillow. For luck. For dreams. And possibly for the mouse. The next few days pass in a kind of golden haze. The abbey is quiet as always, but now the silence carries a different weight, not heaviness, but richness. The sisters move like people who've just shared a secret and agreed not to speak of it, though the corners of their mouths keep betraying them. You're sent to the chapel for cleaning duty, not glamorous. But as you sweep behind the altar, you overhear a soft debate about Belltime's cheesecloth inventory, and whether the abbess really did smile after tasting that miracle wheel. Perhaps it was indigestion, someone whispers. Perhaps it was grace, comes the reply. Meanwhile, downstairs in the dairy, the cheeses keep aging, some peacefully, others with a stubborn streak. One wheel begins to crack early. Sister Gertrude blames the humidity. Sister Marin blames the singing during pressing. Too sharp, she mutters. Curds like rhythm. To test the theory, the next morning's batch is stirred in complete silence. It comes out lumpy. You're reassigned temporarily to the herb shed, where you help Sister Elfrida pack a new wheel in layers of crushed thyme sage and dried apple blossom. She works fast, like someone born with salt in her veins and rennet in her bones. "This one's for the feast of St. Martha," she says. "She's patron of cooks, did you know?" You nod, though you're mostly thinking about the smell, savory, floral, earthy, like the memory of a summer garden pressed into wax. Sister Elfrida lifts the wheel, presses it into a linen-lined mold, then blesses it quietly. Not with a formal prayer, but something half-whispered, half-hummed. "This one should keep," she says, "if the mice stay holy." You ask if any cheese has ever been dangerous. She pauses. There was the incident with the weeping wheel. Naturally, you ask for more. Last winter, a wheel of ash-rubbed goat cheese began to leak. Slowly, through the cloth, down the shelf, left a trail like tears. We thought it was ruined. But when we tasted it, she raises a brow. It was perfect. Better than it should have been. You ask what they did. We renamed it compunctio. You don't need a Latin dictionary to translate that one. It means sorrow, remorse, the kind of sadness that clarifies the soul. That night, it's served with crusty barley bread and slices of dried plum. No one talks about the leak. Everyone tastes slowly, even the abbess. She takes a second piece. Compunctio joins the Abbey's unofficial canon of sacred cheeses, each with its own origin story miracle, or near-death experience. And that's when the sisters begin to write them down. Not recipes, stories. Sister Imelda starts the project scratching them onto spare parchment between verses of psalms. Soon, others join in. They title it Lives of the Cheeseworthy. There's the wheel that would not rot, aged through a whole humid summer without a spot of mold. The ash that turned gold, accidentally stored with saffron, caused a week-long theological debate about divine intervention or mislabeled spice jars. St. Clare's Curse. A batch that turned out beautifully but made everyone cry uncontrollably for an hour. It was eventually served on All Souls' Day. Historians would later find fragments of this manuscript most illegible, some melted from candle wax, or gnawed at the corners. But one page survives a crude illustration of a nun and a mouse sharing a wedge beneath a starry sky. You're present the day that image is drawn. Sister Magdalena leans over the page and adds a tiny halo above the mouse's head. For discretion, she says. By this point, cheese is no longer just nourishment or even craft. It's mythology. Every wheel has a name. Every mold has a mood. Every bite tastes faintly of memory and mischief. And you've become part of it. Your hands are in the curds. Your notes are in the margins. You've dreamt of cheese and woken with answers. And so when Sister Euphemia asks you one rainy morning if you're ready to start your own recipe, you don't hesitate. You say yes. You're given a small vat, a wooden spoon worn smooth, a bundle of herbs. No guidance beyond a smile. You kneel, you stir, you hum. You do not rush. It will take weeks, months even, to know if it's any good. But it will be yours. A wheel of quiet effort, patience, and maybe, if you're lucky, a little holiness. You'll name it later, after it tells you who it is. Rain falls in steady curtains over the cloister garden. The air is thick with the scent of wet stone and thyme. You've never known silence to sound so alive. Raindrops tapping on clay roof tiles, soft rivulets running down the windows, and the occasional sigh from a nearby sister as she adjusts her habit to keep her ankles dry. Inside the dairy, the mood is different, brighter. There's laughter echoing off the walls, muffled behind bundles of drying herbs and thick coats of condensation. Sister Clarice is humming. Sister Elfrida is whistling off-key. And Sister Marin has somehow managed to tie her apron into a complicated knot that no one, including herself, can undo. Something's changed. It's not just the weather or the cheese. It's you. You're no longer the wide-eyed guest clutching a milk pail like it might explode. You're part of the rhythm now. Your hands move without asking permission. Your nose can sniff the difference between a wheel that's aging well and one that's sulking. You've stopped flinching when the curds squelch under pressure. Today you're working on your wheel, the one you stirred, salted, and pressed 2 weeks ago. It's time to unbind it from its linen shroud and take a first look. You set it on the bench, It's small, humble, really. Golden at the edges, a little uneven, and just faintly cracked at the base. You run a finger across the top. The rind is forming. It has weight, substance, identity. It exists. Sister Clarice leans in, sniffs, and nods. Still shy, but promising. You smile. You don't care if it's perfect. It's real. You give it a name. Not something lofty, just something honest. Clement, you whisper. As in gentle. As in forgiving. The sisters nod in approval, each in their own way. Sister Gertrude by scribbling the name into her cellar ledger in her sharp, angular hand. Sister Euphemia by whispering good name without looking up from her churning. Sister Imelda by sketching a tiny, sleepy-faced cheese in the corner of a parchment. Clement is placed on a low shelf. He won't be tasted for weeks, maybe longer. But you'll visit him every day, brush him with brine whisper encouragements, and watch as he becomes what he's meant to be. Meanwhile, life in the abbey carries on. The rain dampens the garden, so prayers are moved to the scriptorium, where the air smells of wax and damp wool. You help copy a cheese inventory list and laugh quietly when you discover that one wheel has been labeled simply too much. You suspect Sister Marin. Later, you assist Sister Scholastica in gathering marigold petals for an upcoming batch. She's debating whether to try an infusion of lemon balm this time. It soothes the spirit, she says, and upsets the mice. In the refectory, Sister Thomasina gives a brief homily about balance, the line between humility and excellence, silence and song rind and rot. Even cheese must be turned regularly, she says, lest it cling too much to one side. You don't know if she's talking about food or faith, probably both. And you start to notice more how the abbess pauses to listen at the door of the dairy before entering, how Sister Imelda sketches in the margins of the delivery logs, how the bells ring half a second slower during storms, as if adjusting their breath. Everything here lives in quiet conversation. The cheese, the rain, the sisters, the silence, even you. One evening, just after Compline, you find yourself alone in the garden. The rain has stopped. The sky is low and gray, but the air is soft. You sit on the bench under the fig tree, the one where Sister Audrey once tied up herbs to dry and forgot them until they grew mold and started dripping into the basil. You smile. The soil smells of endings and beginnings, and you realize this whole place is fermentation, the slow turning of raw things into richness, of time into tenderness, of milk into memory. You head to the cellar one last time that night. Clement is quiet, but solid. You rest a hand on him gently. He doesn't speak, but somehow you know he's listening. The days grow cooler. Autumn's fingertips brush the edge of the abbey walls. Leaves drift into the cloister garden like parchment shaken loose from the margins of a forgotten psalm. Even the cheese changes. The softer wheels take longer to firm up now. The curds cling tighter in the morning chill. Rinds bloom more slowly, less eager to declare themselves. Sister Clarice calls it the quiet season. Sister Gertrude calls it mold weather. You've begun waking before the bell again, not out of duty, but because the cellar calls to you. Each morning you descend the narrow stone steps, lantern in hand, the light flickering against the walls like breath. And each morning you check on Clement. He's firming, gently, gracefully. His rind is speckled with pale blue now, just a hint. Not panic-worthy, Sister Marin assures you. That's personality. One day you find a single clove tucked beside him. You look up and catch Sister Imelda grinning from across the room. It's for luck, she says. Or flavor. Or flirtation. Who knows anymore? The cellar is your chapel now. And the wheels are your choir. Each one sings in its own way. The older wheels hum in low, earthy tones. The younger ones squeak with youth and vinegar. Clement hums quietly, but you swear it's getting stronger. The sisters say cheese can't talk, but the wheels, they listen. One evening, you're invited to a special tasting. It's not a feast day, or even a minor festival, just an internal abbey tradition known only as the Round Table. A half-dozen nuns gather after vespers in the warming kitchen, technically off-limits at night, each bringing a cheese that's ready to meet its fate. No candles, just firelight and whispered laughter. Sister Thomasina brings her cambric cloister a bloomy wheel infused with mint and regret. Sister Euphemia unveils her cracked psalm, which smells like a confession left out in the sun. Sister Clarice has aged a smoky cheddar she insists was blessed accidentally by a visiting friar, with no taste. You bring nothing. You're not ready. Clement is too young. Still settling. Still becoming. But you listen. You taste. You ask questions. How much salt is too much? How do you fix a rind that weeps? What do you do when the curds split unevenly? The answers vary. Some scientific, some spiritual, some that make no sense until you try them at 5 a.m. with cold hands and a stubborn vat. Sometimes you just have to pray with your elbow, says Sister Elfrida. You nod, though you're still not sure what it means. Later, Sister Celestina reads from an old journal, one written by a nun long forgotten, whose handwriting wavers like candlelight. The entry is dated mid-October, centuries ago. Today the curds would not set. I wept, I sang, I stirred anyway. You feel those words settle inside you like whey draining from a press. Because that's what this place teaches you. The value of stirring anyway. Even when the air is cold and the milk feels uncooperative, and the silence seems louder than it should be. The round table ends with a shared cup of warm milk and a small hunk of hard cheese passed in silence. It's not much, but it's everything. The next morning you wake early. You light your own lantern, and you descend into the cellar with one intention. Clement is ready. You press a fingertip to the rind. It gives just slightly. The scent is grassy nutty with the faintest edge of clove still clinging in the corners. You cut a sliver. It's subtle, humble, but warm. You taste grass and patience, a hint of time, a softness that wasn't there a week ago. It's not perfect. It's yours. You don't serve it at dinner. Not yet. You share it quietly with Sister Imelda in the garden, with Sister Euphemia, in the pantry, with Sister Celestina, at the edge of the scriptorium. Each one takes a bite. Each one nods. Clement will stay small. A quiet cheese, a cellar whisper. But in a place built on silence and salt, he fits right in. The frost comes early this year. Not thick, not bitter, but enough to coat the cloister stones in a thin, silver sheen that crunches gently beneath your sandals. Breath clouds in the morning air. The herb garden curls inward. The cows huddle closer together in the pasture, their breath rising like incense into the pale dawn. Clement sits on his shelf in the cellar, his rind firm and slightly waxy to the touch now. You visit him daily, not to check, but to be near. He's become more than a cheese. He's a memory you made solid, a small, round monument to everything you've learned with your hands. But the cold also brings new challenges. The milk changes. It's thinner, cooler, harder to coax into submission. The curds break more easily. The whey drains too fast. Even the seasoned sisters struggle a little more. One morning, Sister Gertrude huffs as her curd collapses again. Winter milk has no patience, she mutters. It wants to sleep, not transform. She's not wrong. Cold seeps into everything. The cheesecloths, the tools, the bones. You find yourself moving slower, hands stiffer, stirring harder, just to keep the rhythm. Still work goes on. Today you're helping with one of the Abbey's oldest recipes, miserere. It's a firm, crumbly cheese made only during the Advent fast, a time of penance prayer and hopeful waiting. The name means have mercy, fitting considering how much effort it takes to make. The curd must be scalded 3 times, salted gently, pressed slowly over the course of 2 days, under a heavy stone, engraved with Psalm 51. It's not about flavor, Sister Scholastica says, watching you struggle to tie the cloth just right. It's about discipline. She's halfway through the sentence when the entire cheese press tips and thumps to the floor. You freeze. She sighs. Mercy indeed. You clean it up. Start again. Stir anyway. Later that week, during your cellar rounds, you discover a small wheel you've never seen before. No name. No label. Just a smooth, dusty rind tucked into a corner. You ask Sister Celestina about it. That's Oratio Silens, she says. Silent prayer. Sister Aldegonde started it before she left. Left, you ask. Transferred. To a hermitage in the mountains. She wanted solitude. And the mold there. She chuckles softly. Said the air had better culture. You sit with the little wheel a while. It's quiet more than most. You wonder if cheese left too long without anyone to listen forgets what it was meant to be. You begin checking on it too. The Abbey holds a vigil on the shortest day of the year. Candles line the cloisters. Psalms are sung in low tones that ripple against the stone like wind through tall grass. The refectory is dark save for a single table at the center. On it bread, apples, and miserere. It's sharp, a little dry, but satisfying. It tastes like everything you've endured this season, prayerful, persistent, and earned. And Clement. You give him a sliver sliced gently and passed quietly to Sister Marin. She smiles without speaking and hands you a tiny jar of pear preserve in return. That night, you write in your journal. Clement holds his shape. I think I'm learning to do the same. Winter deepens. Cheese ages slower in the cold. But better. The flavors sink deeper. The wheels harden with resolve, gaining weight not just in mass, but in meaning. You begin preparing a second batch, not to replace Clement, but to accompany him. You call it amicus. Friend. A new year tiptoes into the abbey, not with trumpets or feasts, but with frost in the garden beds and steam curling from the dairy roof like breath from an old prayer. You mark it not by bells or calendars, but by the flavor of the milk. Richer now, creamier. The cows, despite the cold, are content. Clement has reached full maturity. You can see it in his body, round confident, no longer tentative at the edges. His rind is clean and quiet. His scent has softened, nutty, faintly sweet, with a whisper of clove still hanging on like the final note of a hymn. You bring him out of the cellar one morning, not for show, not even for eating, just to let him breathe. You place him on the cloister wall beneath the winter sun, and sit beside him, watching the shadows stretch. Sister Imelda passes grins and offers him a wave. It's the slowest, gentlest graduation you've ever known. Meanwhile, Amicus is coming along. You've changed a few things this time, cut the curd smaller. Added more salt, brushed the rind with lemon balm. Tea twice a week. He's quieter than Clement, more reserved. A good contrast. You start referring to them jokingly as the introvert and the extrovert. Sister Euphemia approves. All good cheese has a personality, she says. Some bite, some whisper. Some just sit in a corner until you're ready to understand them. One afternoon, the abbess requests an inventory. Not unusual, but it sends the whole convent into a flutter. Everyone begins inspecting their shelves, counting wheels, jotting notes. You're assigned to update the master cheese register. It's a thick tome bound in cracked leather and held together with more hope than stitching. Inside, centuries of names, recipes, notes, and opinions. Lots of opinions. You turn the pages slowly. You find Sister Audrey's cheese, the miracle wheel. You find compunctio, the weeping round. You find cryptic entries like too soft to be judged fairly and best served to sinners. You reach the last page. It's blank. You dip your quill, hesitate, and then write. Clement. A small wheel aged in patience. Notes of time pear and quiet resilience. First of his name. Tempered by early frost, stirred with silence, named after mercy. You pause. Then just below in smaller script, Amicus still becoming. You return the book to the scriptorium where Sister Celestina logs it into her scroll of cheeses most likely to succeed. That evening, something unexpected happens. A novice finds a broken wheel in the cellar, a forgotten round neglected during a shelf shift. Cracked. Split down the middle. Mold creeping in too fast, she cries, not from punishment. From the feeling that she's let it down. That the cheese which she'd named Lucia had trusted her. You kneel beside her, gently gather the pieces, smell the rind. It's still good. Not what it could have been, but not ruined. You warm it, press it into a pot, stir it into a thick, rich mash with barley herbs and a splash of winter wine. The sisters eat in silence. Everyone knows what they're tasting. It is comfort. It is redemption. You tell the novice it still fed us. She nods, eyes wet, and writes Lucia into the ledger anyway. Better to be remembered, she says. And that more than anything is the heart of it. Every wheel matters. The perfect ones. The broken ones. The odd ones too strange to trade, but too lovely to discard. They all take space, take time, and give something back. The abbey is colder now. The frost lasts longer in the mornings. The bells echo sharper in the brittle air. But inside something glows. Clement is served quietly, reverently at the next communal meal. A few slivers only placed with care on each plate. You chew slowly. He tastes like what you hoped, not brilliance, but balance. Not glory, but grace. The end comes gently, not with fanfare, but with warmth. Spring creeps in slowly through thawed garden soil, the first sprigs of wild garlic poking through the hedges, and a faint shift in the way the milk smells in the morning. The cows stretch in the pasture, no longer huddled. The hens resume their gossip. And in the cellar, the wheels begin to soften again, like sighs after a long silence. You've nearly forgotten what color the cloister garden looks like when it's green. Clement has been eaten. Not all at once. A slice here, a wedge there, until only a small heel remains wrapped in waxed cloth and tucked behind the basil vinegar in the pantry. You don't mourn him. He did what he came to do. But Amicus is nearly ready now. He's firmer than Clement ever was. More complex, a little sharp around the edges, but with a creamy center you didn't expect. He smells of lemon balm hay and something almost hopeful. The sisters say every cheese carries the mood of its maker. You hope that's true. One morning you find Sister Celestina at your workbench with an ink-stained finger and a grin. You've been added, she says, handing you a folded page. It's a copy of the Master Cheese Register. And there you are. Name wheel notes. At the bottom, in careful script, this cheese was made with devotion, not ambition. It asked nothing of the world but to be turned, brushed, and believed in. And in return, it became something good. You tape it to the inside of your storage chest, not as proof, just as memory. Abbess Immaculata makes her rounds that week. She stops beside Amicus. Doesn't cut him. Doesn't sniff. Just rests her fingers lightly on the rind and nods. Feels steady, she says. It's the closest thing to a compliment you'll ever need. You celebrate the feast of St. Benedict with lemon cakes, fresh butter, and a soft spring cheese made from the very first bucket of milk drawn on a foggy April morning. You stir it with confidence now. No trembling hands. No second guessing. Your rhythm has become part of the Abbey's rhythm. Your steps align with the bells. Your ears now know the difference between the hiss of good mold and the whisper of too much moisture. You know when a cheese is sulking. You know when to trust silence. On your last night before Pentecost, you descend into the cellar alone. You light one candle. Enough. You walk the rows, trailing your hand gently across the shelves. Some wheels you recognize. Some are new. A few are missing eaten gifted or gone on mysterious missions. Sister Imelda insists one was sent to Rome with a monk who needed emotional reinforcement. You pause in front of Clement's spot. It's empty, but not. You kneel, say nothing, and listen. The candle flickers gently, now casting golden halos on the cellar wall. Your hands are warm from the curd. Your apron smells faintly of thyme, and your feet are heavy with good work. You've spent months in this world of quiet transformations, where milk becomes memory, and silence becomes sustenance. And now you're ready to rest. The shelves behind you hold stories. Some old, some not yet finished. Wheels lined like prayer beads, each one infused with time and tension, and the smallest, most ordinary kinds of hope. Breathe in slowly. The air is cool, soft, a little salty. You hear a drip in the corner. A wheel creaks as it shifts its weight on the shelf. They're alive in their way. You've done well. You stirred, you waited, you tasted, you trusted. You let go. The Abbey above you sleeps now. The bells won't ring for hours. There is nothing left to do tonight but be still. Let your breath settle. Let your mind soften like cheese under a warm knife. Let your thoughts drift toward cows in misty fields, toward cloisters filled with lavender and candlelight, toward nuns with ink-stained fingers and quiet smiles, toward one small wheel that taught you everything without ever saying a word. You are safe here. You are enough here. Sleep now. Tomorrow will come with new milk and new prayers, but for now, let it all rest.